Yamori was a lonely bum who turned down baddies because he didn't understand love. However, everything changes when a crazy vampire girl bites him, but warns that he has to get freaky with her to complete his transition into a vampire. So he claps her as well as her entire group of vampires. Everything began when Yamori started sneaking out at night because he was having a hard time sleeping. On one of those nights, he stops by a vending machine to get a beer, and as he's about to take it, a psycho lunatic named Nazuna shows up and teases him for wanting a beer. Since she looks like every red flag rolled into one person, Yamori gets nervous and tries to run away, but Nazuna pulls him back. She then realizes that he can't sleep and offers to help him out.
What do you mean by that?
And although stunned, Yamori reluctantly follows her, trying to figure out how she wants to help him. On the way, Nazuna explains that people only stay up at night because they weren't satisfied with how they spent their day. To prove her point, she shows Yamori 3 drunk dudes who are fast asleep on the roadside. She explains that they're sleeping carelessly because they've had a blast, and one of them even sleep talks about how he clapped 3 strippers in a club. Nazuna high-fives all of them before walking off, leaving Yamori to question why she's acting so freely around strangers. But Nazuna only tells him to let loose and be free, so he decides to steal a high five from the drunk dudes before walking off. After one dude nearly vomits on him, he decides to join Nazuna at her place to chill for a while, though he finds it weird that he'll be alone with her. Once in, he freaks out after Nazuna appears in her plot armor, and it gets worse when she tells him to join her in bed.
Okay.
However, as all the blood leaves his brain, Nazuna sees where it went and insists he stay because she only wants the tip. And though sleeping with her feels good, Yamori decides to keep his guard up, just in case he becomes a father by morning. 5 minutes in, Nazuna notices no movement from Yamori, so she thinks he's asleep and smiles. She slowly approaches him and leans towards his neck to give him a good sip. She turns red because she never expected a dude built like expired mayonnaise to taste so good. But she almost wets her pants when Yamori gets up and asks what just happened. Judging from the red juice leaking from his neck, he knows something sus went down. But Nazuna fumbles an excuse, claiming that a huge mosquito sucked him. However, Yamori doesn't buy it because the same red juice is leaking from her mouth, which makes him ask if she's a vampire. When Nazuna admits she is, Yamori gets scared, thinking he'll become one. But Nazuna tells him it doesn't work like that. She explains that sucking is more like eating, and she isn't interested in creating vampire offspring. Curious, Yamori questions why he didn't turn, and she explains that the only way he can become a vampire is if he falls in love with her. Saying this makes Nazuna feel shy, especially with her skimpy outfit, but she calms down after having a beer outside. Once relaxed, she explains that when a person who's in love with a vampire gets fed on by that vampire, he becomes the vampire's offspring. She then uses the concept of child making to clarify things, but the topic makes her turn red, and Yamori scolds her for being too freaky. He reveals that he doesn't understand the idea of love, and that he doesn't like girls either, making Nazuna think he likes picking up soap. Right then, Yamori recalls a time when he got called a jerk for turning a girl down. He did so because he didn't understand the concept of liking someone, and since he felt bad about it, he quit school. When he opens up to Nazuna about everything, she then advises him to keep hanging out at night, insisting that it'd be a waste if he gives it up. As Yamori thinks about this, something snaps within him, and he ends up begging Nazuna to turn him into a vampire. This shocks Nazuna because she knows that Yamori will need to fall in love with her first for that to work. But Yamori is already way past that. He wants to enjoy the night and be done with boredom, and he doesn't care if it means having feelings for her. In the end, Nazuna agrees, but sees it only as a means to keep feeding on him. Later, she casually throws him off a rooftop so he can get a feel of the night, but she catches him before he can get reincarnated and proceeds to fly him around to catch the night sky. The next night, he sneaks out of his house again and decides to hang out with Nazuna. While they talk, Nazuna brings up the idea of creating an offspring.
Whoa, calm down, Jamal.
And she turns red when Yamori insists that he'll fall in love with her and become a vampire. It gets worse when Yamori exposes his neck, begging her to feed on him, because doing that is equivalent to seeing Megan Fox in a hot swimsuit. However, after something stops tingling, she regains herself and tells him that he tastes so good. The next day, Yamori wanders off looking for her, but he quits at some point because there's no way he will become a vamp even if she feeds on him now. But on the way home, Nazuna shows up, and he lashes out at her for being hard to find. After Nazuna says she was just looking for an unlucky dude to suck on, he gets jealous and calls her a thirsty hoe. In her defense, she says she was thirsty, and she doesn't see feeding on someone else as a big deal. However, Yamori thinks otherwise because it means she can get clapped by random dudes, so to make sure she doesn't cheat on him, he asks for her number, only to find that she doesn't have a phone. Instead, Mizuna leads the way to her apartment, where she pulls up an old dusty telephone she got centuries ago. She says she doesn't like the new phones being produced because they're so small and reckons that she doesn't need a phone at all. After that, she hops on her bed like it's time to sleep, and when Yamori asks why, she says she's exhausted from all the guys she's been with tonight. Hearing that line makes him feel some type of way, and it doesn't get better even after Mizuna tells him to join her in bed. Although he isn't in love with her yet, he can't bear the thought of Mizuna being with other guys, so he bluntly declines her request to feed on him. While Mizuna crashes out, reminding him that he made a promise, Yamori tells her to feed on someone else, and that's when she realizes that he's jealous about what she did earlier. However, she leans in and reveals the truth that she was looking for him the whole night, and since she was too embarrassed to say it, she made up the story about being with other dudes. She apologizes for being insensitive and promises to make it up to him by demonstrating why she's called the throat goat, but she ends up feeding on him first and passing out, leaving Yamori with something growing under the sheets. Because he didn't get what she promised, he decides to look for her all over the city the next day so she'd have no excuse to sleep early. After searching for so long, he stops to catch his breath, but Mizuna shows up at the nick of time, claiming that she was looking for him too. Regardless of that, Yamori pulls out a wristwatch transceiver so they can talk over long distances.
Tecnologia! Tecnologia!
Mizuna gets overly excited because she wants to use it and play with him, but when she sees the shocked look on Yamori's face, she questions why he got it. Yamori admits he got it when he was a kid so he could play with his friends, and Mizuna coldly reminds him that he has no friends. Pissed, he tells her he wasn't always lonely as a child because back then, he was in school. A few years ago, he got the wristwatches and wondered how he could play with them, so he decided to hide one in a mailbox and talk to anyone who found it. But after some time had passed, he didn't get any call, so he went back to take a look. There, he found that the watch was gone, meaning that someone had taken it. But rather than call the person, he buried his watch in his drawer and decided to wait. Mizuna finds this story depressing as she listens to him in the present, and she can't help but laugh when she sees that Yamori still has the old watch on him. She only calms down after Yamori suggests that they mess around with the watch, so they split up and begin communicating over long distances. He likes the feeling he gets from speaking to her via the watch and is grateful he got them. But Mizuna, on the other hand, turns red when he makes her feel as if they're dating. Yamori hopes to fall in love with her as soon as possible, while Mizuna only looks forward to sucking him dry tonight. Eventually, they meet up, and Mizuna ends up flying Yamori all over the city again. This time, she makes a stop at his school and feeds on him, making him wish he could clap her all night. Later, on the way back home, Yamori looks at his old watch and wonders what happened to its pair. Right then, a beep comes in, and he turns around only to find that it's Akira from school. Since it's so early, Akira asks what he's up to, and Yamori remains speechless. Before then, he had a conversation with Mizuna, where she asked why he didn't have a single friend. The question threw Yamori off guard because he couldn't even tell what it meant to be friends with someone, and Mizuna was left speechless. She teased him for not having friends at all, but he argued that he had when he was a kid, but he found it rude to call someone a friend when he hadn't spoken to them for years. Currently, he wonders why Akira has his transceiver and is shocked when she tells him he gave it to her. She reminds him that they were always in different classes, and she hates that she missed her chance to talk to him when he started making friends. Apparently, she waited for years for Yamori to call her via the transceiver, but she put it away since he never called. As of now, the only reason she beeped him was because she's worried he hasn't been showing up in school, and she wants to know if he is okay. Even after hearing this, Yamori stands confused and speechless as he doubts ever giving Akira the watch, but he smacks his head after she mentions that she picked it from her mailbox. Now, she's glad he's okay and reminds him that they're friends, especially because he left her the watch. She thanks him for it, while Yamori ends up worrying that she got the wrong idea, because as a kid, he doesn't recall being the friendly type. Back then, while his mates were playing games, he'd sit alone and watch ants or do something weird. Akira grew interested in him regardless of that and joined him to watch the ants, since he didn't want to play. As Yamori recalls this in the present, he feels bad and acknowledges that it's been a while since he spoke to her, but he questions why she's in her uniform when it's still so early. Akira tells him she's an early bird and that she takes walks before heading off to school. She then asks what Yamori has been up to, and he tells her he's just walking home. Before leaving, she asks that they meet up tomorrow at the same time, and he agrees. Later, he calls a sleepy Mizuna to give her the news about Akira, but she only tells him goodnight and goes back to bed. A few days later, Yamori gets out of bed around dawn to head out, and Mizuna casually calls him out on his recent habit of leaving early. She teases him and tells him he's free to do whatever, since what they have is a friends with benefits arrangement. While Yamori crashes out, Nazuna jokingly tells him she knows he wants to go see another woman, but his reaction makes her realize that it's true. Knowing that he's been had, Yamori tries to explain himself, but he fumbles his words and ends up running off to meet Akira. This time, while he's chilling with her, he's shocked to see Nazuna watching him from the shadows, so he freaks out and yells for his life. While he fears getting torn to shreds, Nazuna only teases him for playing hanky-panky with Akira behind her back, but she appears cool with everything and even tells Akira that she has nothing to worry about. Akira, on the other hand, thinks Nazuna is bad news and blames her for him quitting school, thinking Yamori likes her. This forces Nazuna to reveal that her relationship with Yamori is purely physical and nothing more. To prove her point, she feeds on Yamori, and Akira watches in shock and realizes that Nazuna is a vampire. They all stop by a restaurant to set things straight, and Nazuna goes for a beer, while Yamori and Akira stick to coffee. Akira doesn't hesitate to go straight to the point as she questions Yamori about his deal with Nazuna. First, she asks why he doesn't show up in school, and when Nazuna mentions that school is for losers, she calls her a trifling hoe and tells her to stop interrupting. All the while, Yamori summons the courage to reveal the truth, so he starts by telling Akira that school was no fun to him. Akira admits that school is no fun too, but says it's no excuse for him to quit at all. She then begs Yamori to join her at school, insisting that it's always fun for her whenever he's around. On hearing this, Yamori runs out of what to say, while Nazuna begins to develop an interest in Akira. After introducing herself, Nazuna asks to confirm if Akira is really Yamori's friend. So when Akira says yes, Nazuna questions why she didn't check up on Yamori all this time, and then she walks out on them. Once she leaves, Yamori reckons that she might be pissed, so he runs after her to find out what's up. When he finds her, she denies being pissed, but Yamori pushes further, and she snaps at him, calling him a degenerate loser. Right then, she flies off, and Yamori quickly loses track of where she went. After a few hours of unproductive search, he begins to wonder why Nazuna got angry like that, but he misses a step and falls on the ground. While he recovers, he reaches out to Nazuna via the watch and apologizes for anything he might have done. He admits not knowing why she's upset and thinks it's because he was meeting Akira in secret. When Nazuna says it's okay for him to have friends, he begs her to at least tell him why she's pissed so they can make up. Hearing this makes Nazuna appear at the spot, and she explains that she's only pissed because he didn't say anything when Akira asked him to join her at school. With this in mind, Yamori tells her there's no way he'd show up at school. He only hesitated because he didn't know how to tell Akira the whole truth about how he wants to become a vampire. Nazuna grows relieved after hearing this, but on noticing the red juice on Yamori's lips, she kisses him, then smiles and flies off, claiming it's what friends do. Later that morning, Akira sits by herself in class and listens to a boring lecture about how the human body needs lots of sleep. After school, she gets home and takes a dip in the shower. Later, she hops on her bed exhausted, so she passes out, and that's how her day ends. Meanwhile, Yamori's day begins at night as he sneaks out again to meet Nazuna. This time, he locates her easily and finds it weird that she's sitting out in the open. But since he's not ready to see her just yet, he turns around to take a walk. On the way, the only thing that keeps popping into his mind is the kiss he shared with Nazuna earlier, and he freaks out when he sees a couple kissing up close. On realizing that only couples in love usually kiss, he considers the possibility of being in love with Nazuna and starts rejoicing because it means that he's one bite mark away from becoming a vampire. Soon, Nazuna shows up and questions what he's been up to, complaining that she sat out in the open so he could find her. But rather than give her a reasonable answer, Yamori smiles and exposes his neck, begging her to feed on him. This throws Nazuna off guard because it's causing her prickle to tingle, so she jumps on the opportunity to feed on him and satisfy her other cravings later. Once she's done feeding on him, Yamori wonders why he's still normal, and Nazuna breaks it to him that he's not in love yet. She knows he was hyped about the kiss from last night, so she explains that what he's feeling is lust and not love. On hearing this, the once enthusiastic Yamori crashes out, as he realizes that he only got aroused after Nazuna kissed him. With no chills, Nazuna asks that they go for another round of kissing, but Yamori backs off, saying he doesn't want to be fooled into smashing her cheeks. He thinks she's a hoe because he believes she's kissed lots of people, only to find that it was her first kiss too. The following day, midnight hits, and Akira wakes up and finds it hard to sleep, so she decides to dress up for school. On the way, she bumps into Yamori, who finds it weird that she's up already. She quickly realizes that he's going off to see Nazuna and advises him to sleep because his body needs it. However, Yamori brushes that off and decides to invite Akira to hang out with him and Nazuna instead. An hour later, Yamori crashes out from getting trashed by Nazuna in a video game, while Akira only sits and watches them. Once they're done, Nazuna challenges her to a match, offering to kiss her if she loses. but Akira declines the kissing part. On second thought, she snaps after realizing that Yamori would have been kissed if he won the match. She then turns to Yamori, offering to support any kind of woman he'd like to be with, but places Nazuna as an expectation, calling her a trashy monster. In Nazuna's defense, she says Yamori doesn't like her. Then she pulls up a dating simulation game for Yamori to play. Akira spectates the whole thing and notices that Yamori is into chicks who are watermelon ambassadors, but he's also about justice for flatboards too. Deep down, Akira feels relieved seeing how Yamori acts around Nazuna, because she was previously scared they were smashing or something. Once 4 o'clock hits, Nazuna suggests they all take a nap, so Yamori saves his progress in the game to play it later. As for Akira, she's shocked that Yamori has been sleeping with Nazuna all this time. While Yamori tries to defend himself, Nazuna makes things worse by revealing that he gets to sleep with 2 girls tonight. As planned, Nazuna makes Yamori sleep in the middle, while Akira struggles to process sleeping with him, so she decides to leave for school at once. However, Yamori tells her it's dangerous, while Nazuna reminds her that it's raining and there are no umbrellas. She makes things worse for Akira as she leans in and feeds on Yamori. But this time, Akira asks why she keeps feeding on him. Nazuna says it's because Yamori is tasty, and that he wants her to keep feeding off him. Despite that, Akira doesn't buy the explanation, so she presses further to find out what's really going on. That's when Yamori reveals his desire about wanting to be a vampire, but Akira thinks he should be one already since Nazuna has fed on him more than once. As Yamori explains how he'd become a vampire, Nazuna turns red, because it entails Yamori falling in love with her, so she rolls over, insisting that they all go to bed. While in bed, Yamori apologizes to Akira for dragging her into his mess, explaining that he told her the truth so she wouldn't be worried about him. Akira tells him she's cool with it and insists he release his hands and not act scared about touching her, so he can fall asleep. They both have a heart-to-heart conversation where Akira confirms that she'll still be friends with him even when he becomes a vampire. She admits she'll still drag him to school someday because even a vampire needs an education. Meanwhile, Yamori is stuck looking at her short skirts, wondering why they'll go up. Soon, they pass out, and Akira wakes up a few hours later only to find that she's late for school. As she rushes out, Nazuna teases her for feeling satisfied, which was why she overslept, and deep down, Akira knows it's true. Later that day, Nazuna wakes up from sleep and is a bit frustrated that it isn't nighttime yet, so she passes the time by playing video games. After losing a top-rated match, she recalls that her package is on the way and realizes that she missed it because she was asleep during the day. Pissed, she decides to buy some things at the convenience store, but she stops on the way to play with a stray cat. A few meows later, Nazuna regrets touching the cat because it stinks, so she stops at a public bath to take a shower. Before heading off, she drops her wristwatch for the receptionist so he can check if it still works, since Yamori hasn't called her yet. After she takes a shower, she grows frustrated over the fact that vampires can't see their reflection in the mirror, but she brushes it off the moment her watch beeps. Outside, she meets Yamori, who finds it hard to believe that she's the one, especially since her hair is loose and she's wearing something so short. As he tries to control the urge to smash her on the spot, Nazuna teases him and says he should go take a shower too. While in the public bath, Yamori's mind keeps drifting to how hot Nazuna is, but he realizes that his time with her is making him feel some emotions he isn't used to yet. Once he dresses up, he sees Nazuna again, and his worldly desires kick in so much that he doesn't hear a thing she says when they get outside. He only regains his senses when Nazuna appears in front of him, but he ends up asking her to feed on him. Nazuna, not being the type to resist, jumps on the offer immediately. But deep down, Yamori wants her to feed on him because it helps calm his nerves and access his feelings to see if he's in love with her or not. However, Nazuna feeds too much because she's hungry, and though the process is painful, Yamori can't help but get aroused by it. He tries to catch his breath when Nazuna is done, and points at a spot for them to chill, only to find that it's a love hotel. Nazuna likes the idea of being here since it means she can get freaky with him, while Yamori is trying his best to resist the urge. On the other hand, Nazuna calls him out for his feelings, revealing that she could tell what was going through his mind when she fed on him earlier. Apparently, Yamori doesn't fancy clapping someone he sees as a friend, but Nazuna tells him there's nothing wrong with having dirty thoughts every once in a while. She looks forward to feeding on him again, so she can taste the different flavors of his emotions, especially because he tasted so good earlier. After that, Nazuna settles to play a plotful video on high volume to disturb other customers, but it hurts that she has to pay for it first. Later, while hanging out with Nazuna, Yamori recalls that she complimented him for being tasty, so he begins feeling insecure because it means she's tasted other guys before. While he struggles to process that, Nazuna casually points at some dude she's fed on before, leaving him in shock. Nazuna quickly figures that he doesn't want to hear about the other guys she's been with and thinks he's jealous, so she tells him she's fed on women before, and now she's only feeding on him. Curious, Yamori wonders how she used to feed before they met, and she reveals that she'd invite her prey over under the pretense of some naughty services. At her apartment, she dresses in her work attire, explaining that she used to be a professional cuddler, and sometimes a happy ending was involved. Shocked, Yamori looks through the menu and decides to get a massage. So Nazuna jumps on him and gets into it right away. Midway through, something begins to rise, and Yamori ends up convincing himself that he doesn't have any ulterior motives. It gets worse when Nazuna gets to his neck, and that's when he realizes that she used to feed on her clients when they were relaxed and passed out. As time goes on, one thing leads to another, and they get intimate. But before things can get interesting, the doorbell rings, and Nazuna realizes that it's an ex-customer named Kiyosumi. She wonders what to do since she's already tired from massaging Yamori, so she tells Yamori to attend to Kiyosumi instead. A few minutes later, Yamori welcomes her in. The moment she confirms that she wants a massage session, Yamori heads off to meet Nazuna. First, he snaps at her for playing video games despite claiming she's tired, then listens as Nazuna tries to convince him to massage Kiyosumi's body. She tries to use that to bait him into it, but when Yamori refuses, she tells him she's broke and that she used to make a living off offering services. About Kiyosumi, she works at a firm and she doesn't really vibe with her male colleagues, who often see her as an object. She hates the idea of going out to have drinks with them, and prefers to pull an all-nighter at her job instead. Apparently, the corporate world is too much for her to handle, which is why she stopped by Nazuna's place to receive body massages from time to time. In some sessions, she cried tears of joy from the way Nazuna touched her, but now she finds it weird that a guy is attending to her. While she waits to get the massage, Yamori is somewhere in the other room, getting promised a kiss in exchange for giving her a good massage. With that on the line, Yamori attends to Kiyosumi right away, dressed in a cosplay nurse outfit. As he gets into it, Kiyosumi tells him to go hard on her, and the thought of getting paid motivates him to keep going. At some point, Kiyosumi gets curious and asks how old he is. And after he reveals this, she wonders why he's working. Yamori says it's because he needs the money, and then goes on about how he doesn't sleep at night. He explains that he enjoys chilling out at night and doesn't want to miss the feeling. However, Kiyosumi's mood shifts after hearing this, as she recalls experiencing the same fun when she was Yamori's age. Back then, while she was still in school, she enjoyed the time she went out at night to grab things at a convenience store. Currently, she misses those night strolls, but curiously asks Yamori why he stopped school. Yamori says it's because it got boring, causing Kiyosumi to burst out laughing. She admits she's burned out too, which is why she showed up, and she's sick and tired of working with her colleagues. Truth is, she doesn't like being in the midst of people, and since she doesn't work alone, she has to fake having fun at her job. As she thinks about it, she begins to cry since she's tired of everything, but she stops the moment her boss calls her. Despite it being so late, she knows her boss wants her to show up at the office, and she needs to leave or else she'll face the consequences. Shocked, Yamori realizes that she's just like him, so he tells her she isn't going anywhere and that she's crashing in the apartment for the night because her session isn't over. To show seriousness, he calls Nazuna, who materializes through a wall, leaving Kiyosumi shocked. When he begs her to stop Kiyosumi from leaving, she says okay, then proceeds to toss the chick out the window. But before she can fall to her death, Yamori jumps out and catches her, while Nazuna gives him a lift. While she struggles to catch her breath, Yamori still insists that she doesn't go back to work, but she tells him that she has no choice. She reminds him that it's not like school she can bail on easily, and that she needs to answer when her boss calls. Despite that, Yamori reveals that Nazuna is a vampire, and he's hoping to be turned into one so he can enjoy the night. Though Kiyosumi finds this weird, she also finds it amusing and begins to laugh. And just like that, her mood lightens up. After having a feel of what enjoying the night feels like, she realizes that she can't keep doing it forever and settles for going back to her job. Before leaving, she tells Yamori that she feels relieved and thanks him for everything. But Yamori promises to make her a vampire when he becomes one. Later, Nazuna calls Yamori out on the promise he made to Kiyosumi, especially because he isn't sure when he'll become a vampire. But Yamori claps back, claiming that he's popular with girls, meaning that he can make Kiyosumi fall in love with him easily. The next day, when Yamori shows up at Nazuna's place, she tells him to think of something fun they can do. So he suggests that they go to a midnight pool party. Nazuna immediately agrees, and Yamori looks forward to seeing how hot she would look in a swimsuit. To his surprise, she turns up wearing a normal outfit, but despite that, he finds it weird that she's hotter than all the chicks in swimsuits. While Nazuna walks away to get drinks, all the guys drool over her, hoping to ask her out, and Yamori grows jealous when he sees two guys hitting on her. When asked, Nazuna confirms being out with Yamori, but when the guys offer to buy her a drink, She claims that Yamori must have gone home and then accepts their offer. This makes Yamori grow more jealous on the spot, so he takes matters into his own hands and drags Nazuna away from getting pumped and dumped by strangers. Outside, Yamori bluntly tells her that the pool party wasn't fun at all, and he didn't like that all the guys there were thirsting after her. On seeing that he's sad, Nazuna decides to take him to another pool, but this time, they'll be alone in his school's pool. Barely 5 minutes in, Yamori reverts to his normal self as if he wasn't mad at all. He even lets her feed on him, and the cameraman couldn't show what happened next. Over the weekend, Yamori creeps outside and tries to avoid bumping into someone from school, so he gets shocked when a chick calls him. Turns out, it's Kiyosumi, who is also worried about bumping into one of her colleagues or her boss. She buys Yamori a drink as a way to thank him for promising to turn her, especially because the thought of it makes her feel better. When she leaves, Yamori finds it weird that she gifted him because he's never received anything from anyone before, but he snaps out of it when it starts to rain. While under a shade, he watches as some chick turns down a guy hitting on her and is shocked as she waves at him. When it's time for him to have his drink, the girl shows up and her name's Seri. Apparently, she's hot, which is why Yamori finds it weird that she wants to talk to a guy like him. Seri tells him the dude from earlier offered to pay her cash to take her out. And though Yamori feels bad about the sad reality of women, Seri reveals that she wanted to get hit on. Turns out, the only reason she rejected the previous guy was because he wasn't her type. While Yamori tries processing this, he mistakenly locks eyes with her plots. But even when he's caught, Seri opens her shirt to give him a good view of her micers. As he tries to resist, Seri takes his drink and walks away after revealing that she's interested in him. Yamori only follows her to get his drink back and make sure she's safe. On getting to a corner, she hugs him for looking out for her and casually mentions Yamori's name despite him not telling her yet. Before she backs away, she tries feeding on Yamori, only for Nazuna to show up from nowhere and rip her arm off. Yamori is shocked as he realizes that Seri was a vampire all along, while Seri trolls Nazuna for only feeding on him. She questions why she hasn't turned Yamori yet, reminding her that it is against their rule as vampires to do such. But since she threatens to suck all the red juice from Yamori's vein, Nazuna snaps and beats her to a pulp. But another vampire named Kabura shows up and takes Yamori away. She flies him off to the company of 3 other vampire chicks who give him a warm welcome. Yamori finds all of them attractive and quickly realizes that all vampires are hot. One of them, named Nico, gains his attention and tells him to pick any of them he'd like to smash. She also tells him that he's out of time, and she's sure to unalive him if he doesn't choose, since he knows too much about their existence already. When he mentions that he wants Nazuna, all the vampires freak out, with Nico wondering why he'd pick her over 4 of the hottest vampires alive. Midori brushes it off, confident she can still snatch Yamori and make him hers, all because he's still holding onto his V-card. Feeling the competition, Nico decides to up her game and riz Yamori into wanting her, but he ends up comparing her to Nazuna, which leaves her feeling insulted. Apparently, the vampires don't like Nazuna because she's not interested in seducing humans into making them vampires, which is essential for their race to thrive. Meanwhile, Nazuna finishes her fight with Seri and realizes what the other vampires are up to. To Seri's shock, Nazuna reveals that she plans to turn someone, and she ends up thinking that Yamori was just her plaything after all. But what shocks her the most is when Nazuna admits that she wants to turn Yamori. Back at the vampire meeting, Midori activates her domain expansion, which involves infinite seduction, and tries to win Yamori, but she's shocked to her bones when Yamori turns her down, because apparently no guy has said no to her before. On the other hand, another vampire named Hatsuka tells Yamori to pick unless he dies, but they're all shocked when he reveals that he has always wanted to become a vampire. Nico first thinks he's lying to save his skin, but as he says he wants to fall in love with Nazuna, she shows up and becomes speechless for like 5 minutes. When she summons the courage to speak, she tells Yamori to join her, but Nico stops her, insisting that she owes the vampires an explanation. They question how she wants to make Yamori fall for her, and soon realize that she has no plan at all. With that, Kabura takes advantage of the situation, trying to seduce Yamori and figure out what makes him so special. But before she can do anything Suzy, Nazuna threatens to unalive her, while Nico tells her to cut it out. She only wants to know Nazuna's true intentions for Yamori because she's never wanted to turn anyone. Right then, Yamori reveals that Nazuna wants him because he tastes good, and that after they met, he genuinely wanted to become a vampire. Even after saying this, Nico and the other vampires insist on hearing Nazuna's intentions because she might be lying. So Yamori tells them she agreed to his falling in love with her. But one thing that shocks them is when Yamori talks as if he has all the time in the world to become a vampire. On seeing the shock on their faces, Yamori asks what's up, and Nico tells him that he needs to become a vampire within a year or else he never will. This shocks Yamori as he turns to Nazuna, who claims she forgot to tell him that part. To calm him down, she kisses him on the spot and says it's payment for massaging Kiyosumi the other day, then she takes him away. On the way, Yamori thinks about everything that happened and realizes that he might have gotten himself ice-skated. Nazuna notices the long face and asks what's up, but he ignores her and tells her he's happy he met her first. At dawn, Yamori opens up to Akira about everything, including the part where he has a deadline to become a vampire. Akira tells him he's in a tight spot, and he only realizes it when Akira explains that the vampires are sure to unalive him if he doesn't turn within a year. He freaks out at the possibility of dying within a year, but calms down a bit after Akira offers to help him. When the day breaks, Akira heads off to school, and on the way, she wonders if Yamori will be okay. She recalls that he was always a bright student in school, but wonders why he's acting so dumb now. However, she snaps out of her thoughts when she bumps into an old friend named Maharu, who's sleeping on the stairs. When asked why he's napping, he mentions that he was out all night with some chick he likes. Apparently, he spends his nights with her because she gets off work late. And that's how Akira realizes that she's older. Maharu claims that the older ones taste better. But before Akira can judge him for liking stepmoms, he asks about Yamori. He's noticed that Yamori has been skipping school and misses hanging out with him and Akira like they used to. On hearing this, Akira wonders if she's dreaming because they didn't really hang out that much. Back then and even now, Maharu was a cool kid, and he always had a flock of friends around him, which was why Akira and Yamori couldn't spend that much time with him. Currently, he tells Akira to say hi to Yamori on his behalf, adding that he's been thinking of him recently. As he leaves, Akira still tries to process the thought of him being into hot stepmoms, and she recalls what he used to be like in elementary school. That time, when Yamori and Akira were observing ants, Maharu pulled up and asked Yamori to join his baseball team. Yamori initially declined because he couldn't play, but he was forced to accept after Maharu offered to teach him the basics. Now in the present, Akira notices that Maharu barely has time for himself and wishes he could get enough sleep. That evening, while Yamori is out taking a stroll, Sari pulls up on him and he instantly panics, recalling what happened the last time they met. So he decides to run away, but Sari holds him back, promising not to unalive him. She even begs to have a bit, but Yamori turns her down immediately. After taking the L, she listens as Yamori complains that 1 year is too short for him to become a vampire. He thinks he won't make the cut, and to top it off, he still doesn't understand the concept of love. All the while, Sari almost gets nosebleeds as she listens to him, especially because he appears so innocent. She then comes up with multiple strategies Yamori can use to fall in love with Nazuna. After their conversation, Yamori appears at Nazuna's door, begging her to join him for a date. Without thinking twice, Nazuna declines, and Yamori crashes out on her for picking video games over going out with him. Nazuna says it's because he isn't good enough, but Yamori promises to grow an extra inch before they smash at night. With that, Nazuna agrees to go out with him, but she gets bored on a movie date. Pretty soon, she realizes that the whole thing was Sari's idea, even though Yamori is too scared to mention her. As she goes through the list of activities, she loses interest and dumps Yamori for the night. Later, while Yamori lies in bed trying to figure out what went wrong, Nazuna gets thirsty for him and realizes it's high time to use him for food, so she shows up around midnight and takes Yamori out on a date to see the night sky. After flying around for a while, she stops, feeds on him, then dips out and dumps him once she's done. As Yamori nags, trying to figure out where she went, he notices Maharu and some friends on the road and ducks to avoid being spotted. But just as he thinks he's free, Maharu doubles back and reaches out to say hi. He then leads the way to a quiet spot, and Yamori finds it hard to believe that he still remembers him. Maharu smiles and tells him it's because they are friends, reminding him that Akira was in their group too. Back then, Yamori knew Akira and Maharu were friends, but he felt nervous around Akira and didn't know how to act around her. As for Maharu, he never had that problem because he was that cool student who got along with anyone. And to top it off, his parents ran a flower shop, so no one had anything bad to say about him. Currently, Yamori finds it refreshing that Maharu still thinks of him as a friend, but he's shocked when Akira shows up out of nowhere. Though it's midnight, Akira is just waking up, and she wastes no time exposing Yamori for skipping school to hang out with some chick at night. She wants Maharu to talk some sense into him, but Maharu leaves since stepmommy is calling. In the meantime, Nazuna enjoys a beer, wondering where Yamori is, and the dude shows up. Earlier, she saw Maharu with some chick and felt uncomfortable because guys like him should be off limits. Now, she grabs Yamori's hand and heads off strolling with him into the night. Elsewhere, Sari sits all by herself and grows uncomfortable as multiple guys flood her DMs with messages. Deep down, she hates that she has to deal with them. And though she once thought about turning one of them into a vampire, she's not feeling like it anymore. As she thinks about this, she turns around and is excited to see Yamori, only to eat a nasty kick from Nazuna when she tries to hug him. As Sari recovers, Yamori wonders why Nazuna went that far, and she tells him she was only trying to protect him. She says her legs twitch anytime she sees Sari's face, which explains the kick, but Yamori doesn't find it cool at all. He's forced to watch as both petty vampires fight over who gets to call him daddy tonight. After Seri takes an L, she walks away, telling Nazuna she only wanted to tease Yamori. Meanwhile, Yamori notices that something's up with her, so he ditches Nazuna to ask what's wrong. Somehow, they end up at a karaoke spot, where Seri casually complains about having too many guys texting her. She decides to calm her nerves by singing a song, but Yamori doesn't vibe with the kind of song she likes. Though it's one of the recent ones, he doesn't know the lyrics, and the loser prefers to sing one released 2 decades before he was born. That's when Seri realizes he has no life apart from clapping Nazuna all night. But before she can roast him for it, a creepy dude named Akiyama shows up at the door. Yamori gets scared at the way he bangs the door, but Seri already knows he's coming for her. Akiyama keeps calling her name, begging her to at least listen, but Seri snubs him while Yamori freaks out. He wonders why Seri is acting so cool about it, but she explains that she has other stalkers too who are obsessed with her, meaning she's used to it. Regardless, Yamori feels unsafe as Akiyama keeps banging the door, so Seri tells him to get out, and he obeys. As Yamori tries to process this, he stops to ask how Seri plans to handle the issue, and she casually mentions that she'll unalive Akiyama. At first, Yamori thinks she's joking, but he realizes she's serious when he sees the look on her face. He tells her not to do it, but when Seri insists, he calls her species out for acting so entitled. However, Seri claps back, arguing that humans are the entitled ones and they're not the only ones allowed to take a life. She hates how judgy they get toward vampires for doing the same thing. As their argument escalates, Akiyama shows up at the door again, thinking they're fighting because of him, and he snaps. On seeing the look in his eyes, Yamori realizes he's far too gone, but he still saves him when Seri tries to take his life. As Seri prepares to attack again, Yamori makes a run for it and drags Akiyama along with him. After covering a few blocks, Yamori stops to catch his breath, but Akiyama is more concerned about understanding his relationship with Seri. He thinks Yamori is smashing her or something of the sort, but the shocking part is that he doesn't even know if Seri likes him or not. That's when it hits Yamori that he might be in love with Seri, and when Akiyama confirms it, Yamori begs him to explain how love feels. A few months ago, a tipsy Akiyama met Seri for the first time, and they went on a date. Over time, they got close, but Akiyama grew unsatisfied with the consistent teasing and flirting. He wanted more from her, but it began to hurt when he wasn't with her, which was why he filled her phone with texts. Even now, he's unsure of what Seri thinks of him and feels she might be saying something bad about him behind his back. Yamori confirms this, but while he tries to explain things to him, Seri shows up and tells Yamori to step aside so she can unalive Akiyama. She then apologizes to him for flirting all this time and reveals that she's a murderous vampire. She includes the part where she gets men to fall in love with her so she can turn them, but when she mentions unaliving Akiyama again, Yamori says he will not let her do it. Before then, he had already signaled Nazuna using his watch, so when Seri tries to attack, Nazuna shows up and gives her a beating. She threatens to unalive Seri if one hair from his sax goes missing, but Seri says she's only after Akiyama. Curious, Nazuna questions why she wants to unalive the dude because it's unlike her to do so. However, Akiyama speaks up, blaming himself for everything that's going on. Apparently, he was friends with Seri and wasn't supposed to fall for her. Seri confirms this and even mentions that she never wanted to turn him. She was sick of the whole love thingy with humans and confided in Akiyama because he was the only person she could talk to. Now, she wants to cut ties with Akiyama and act like they never met. But Yamori isn't cool with this. He yells at Seri and calls her out for being crazy because it's unreasonable to leave a guy like Akiyama hanging like that. After talking some sense into her, she apologizes to Akiyama and ends up crying because she doesn't want to stop being with him. On hearing this, Akiyama tells her how he feels about her and begs to be turned into a vampire so he can spend the rest of his life with her. Just like that, Seri agrees to turn him, and while she feeds off him, Nazuna teases Yamori for wishing he were the one getting turned instead. After that, Seri drags them all the way to a karaoke spot so they can celebrate the beginning of her vamp relationship with Akiyama. A few days go by, and Midori runs out of staff for her vamp-made cafe, so she starts looking for any vampire who isn't as hot as she is, to prevent them from stealing the tastiest men. Coincidentally, Nazuna shows up with Yamori, and that's how Midori gets the idea to employ Nazuna right away. Once Nazuna tries on the maid cosplay outfit, Midori sees that she can pull off the job. However, she smiles, confident that she can make Yamori fall for her hot body. But Yamori pays no attention to her. After teaching Nazuna the basics of serving their customers, Midori sets her up with Yamori, but she fumbles her lines. Still, Nazuna manages to step up when she hears how much she'll get paid for the job, though she ends up taking the maid act way too far. As for Midori, Yamori questions how she had to act to get so popular, but she only tells him it's because she's cute. She demonstrates this by serving some dude, and her body language alone makes the guy fall in love with her faster than he can bust a nut. Meanwhile, a maid catches Yamori's attention, and he likes the way she treats him. Her name is Arisa, and since she's so hot, Yamori can't help but stare in silence. When he then mentions that he's with Midori, Arisa warns him to use her first name because of her identity. Arisa explains that though Midori became popular when she first showed up at the cafe, she herself was the most popular maid before then. Deep down, Arisa envies Midori's beauty. But to Yamori, all the vampire maids are just as beautiful, which is why the kiss Midori throws at him has no effect. After the day's work, Nezuna chugs down a whole bottle of beer to calm herself, while Midori checks social media to see if the maid cafe's account is getting any likes. Surprisingly, she realizes that someone is taking inappropriate pictures of Arisa, meaning a stalker might be obsessed with her. It stuns Midori that Yamori is able to identify the maid in the picture as Arisa, so she asks how he did it. He claims he zoomed in on the picture and could tell from Arisa's plots, though Nezuna finds it weird that he did. With that, Midori insists on finding the culprit as soon as possible, and Yamori agrees to handle it. He spends the whole morning at the maid cafe staring at Arisa's spicy pictures with lotion and gets caught when Arisa walks in to change. After bypassing all the weirdness, she apologizes for getting too sloppy and allowing someone to take spicy pictures of her. But Yamori says no one is perfect. He assesses the room and notes the perspective of the picture, realizing it was taken from the window. Still, he halts his investigation and leaves when it's time for Arisa to change. Outside, Yamori tells Nezuna everything he knows about the case so far and leads the way to inspect how the culprit managed to take the pictures. On checking the window, he confirms that's where the culprit stood. But since the door to the room is locked, he believes only a vampire could pull such a stunt. At first, Nezuna thinks Midori is the one behind it, but Yamori clarifies that she was in the cafe the whole time. All of a sudden, Arisa opens the window and is shocked to find Yamori and Nezuna there. Nezuna tells her not to worry and to let Yamori carry out his investigation. After taking a few pictures of the room from the window, he realizes something is off. He then takes a photo of Nezuna, and it turns out bad. That's when it clicks that Arisa's spicy pictures look too good. He becomes confident he can crack the case. At the spot, he transforms into an overpowered detective, leaving Nezuna to wonder when he grew an extra brain, quickly realizing it's only because Arisa's spicy pictures are on the line. Yamori tells her to gather all the staff when their evening shift is up, because he's confident the culprit will be among them. But when the time comes, all his confidence fades, and he tells Midori he doesn't think he can solve the case. However, when he hears footsteps nearing the room, he tells Nezuna to act like they planned, while he joins Midori to hide in a locker. Once Arisa enters the room, Nezuna leaves after telling her she's the last maid around. Meanwhile, Yamori grows uncomfortable as he hides with Midori in the locker because her milkers are pressed against his chest. As for Midori, she wonders why they have to hide in the locker, and Yamori explains that the culprit is after Arisa. So now is the best time to strike. As Midori gets closer to him to see the photos, she feels something crawling on her legs and reminds him that a few days ago, she wasn't his type. Yamori says he can't help it since she's blessed on both sides, but he stops touching her when he hears the sound of the window opening. Right then, Midori joins him to see who's there, but they find that Arisa is the one taking spicy pictures of herself. Curious, Yamori asks why she's doing it, and Midori cuts in immediately because she already knows. First, she explains that Arisa is jealous of all the attention she's been getting from men, which is why she leaked her own photos to attract thirsty customers and gain more attention. Though it's messed up, Midori is cool with it because no one is perfect. Despite that, Arisa feels bad for herself and decides to quit her job. But Midori convinces her not to, reminding her that most girls crave attention, and some even get paid for it. In the end, both parties make up. As for Midori, she stops by the cafe and talks to Yamori about how she likes taking cute pictures of herself until they're perfect. She then poses for a selfie and baits Yamori into joining in. After working for a few weeks at the maid cafe, Nezuna buys a proper bed for her apartment and a few disturbing outfits. While Yamori finds this impressive, Nezuna explains that she did it because working at the cafe made her realize she likes money. Now, she wants to continue her cuddly buddy business to keep cash coming in. So Yamori goes out to help her find the right customers. On the way, he bumps into a certain chick on the road, and since she looks tired, he decides she'd be the perfect candidate for Nezuna. Her name's Anko, and Yamori ends up freaking out when she asks him what's up. Somehow, he bags her and finds himself on a date with her, explaining how his intentions for her are pure. On hearing about the cuddly buddy thing, Anko's mood shifts because she thought he was hitting on her and was hoping to get hammered by him since she's been thirsty for so long. She calls Yamori out for working so late, reminding him that it's illegal for someone like him to be working such hours. But on seeing how freaked out Yamori is, she tells him she's not a cop. At first, she declines meeting Nezuna for a session, but she begins to consider it when Yamori mentions giving her a massage. Curious, he asks what she does for a living, and she reveals that she's a private investigator. Her job floors Yumori, who thinks people like her only exist in the movies, but she tells him she looks into missing person cases, as well as cheating spouses. Just like you losers gooning to this recap, on second thought, Anko asks Yumori if he's the kind of guy who likes wandering around the streets at night. When Yumori says yes, she mentions that she's looking for a missing person named Akiyama. The name rings a bell since he's Seri's new boyfriend, but as Yumori tries to lie his way out of this, Anko pulls him in, and he panics. From reading his pulse, she can tell he knows something about Akiyama, though she lets Yumori go and apologizes for being too hard on him. She then leaves after telling him to hit on her properly next time, so she can show him the advantages that come with smashing a detective's kitty cat. Later, Yumori returns to Mizuna, who yells at him for getting no customers, so he makes it up to her by giving her some booze. The following day, Akira and Yumori meet up with Maharu in the evening, and it turns out they all want to sneak into their school and mess around. It's Maharu's idea, and though Akira hesitates, she realizes she could just hang out with them and have a good time. Once inside, Maharu tells them the school has about 7 scary mysteries, and he wants to confirm them all. First, he checks the restroom for the rumored girl who haunts it, only to get a swollen head after trying to scare Akira. Next, they check the music room for the piano that plays on its own, and a few other creepy spots. After checking them all and seeing they're fake, Maharu speaks of another one, about their old teacher who vanished in the past and supposedly appears in the classroom at night. Turns out, his case was never solved. Maharu grows interested in confirming if it's true, so he drags Yumori and Akira along. Normally, he'd hope it was just another fake mystery, but the moment he opens a specific classroom, he sees the old teacher, who coldly questions what they're doing in school at that time. All three freeze in shock as they see their missing teacher from 10 years ago. And to make things worse, he's a thirsty vampire with a nasty appetite for hot, timid girls like Akira. He attacks her first and tries to feed, while Maharu reacts quickly and tries to get him off Akira. He begs Yumori to at least lend a hand, but Yumori is stuck trying to understand why the teacher is different from the other vampires. Apparently, the teacher has resisted the urge to feed for 10 years, and he hates that Yumori's group showed up at the wrong time. While Akira tries to apologize, Yumori swoops in and attacks the man with a chair. With that, he rescues Akira, but he keeps thinking something's up with the vamp teacher, especially because he looks like he's in excruciating pain. Right then, the vamp teacher regains a part of his humanity and begs Yumori and his friends to run away because he'll soon lose control. Surprisingly, Anko shows up, and she doesn't look disturbed at all by the fact that he's a vampire. Instead, she welcomes the dude with open arms, offering herself up as fresh food, but the vamp pulls away after digging in for a second, because she tastes awful. On the other hand, Anko turns around like nothing happened and starts giving the students a full lecture about vampires. She knows the vamp teacher has been missing for a decade. Plus, he hasn't fed in a while, and today would have been his last day to live. Curious, Yumori wonders why the teacher held back for so long, and Anko asks him why anyone would be comfortable being a vampire in the first place. Immediately, the vamp teacher starts confessing how he was tricked into falling in love with a vampire and got turned in the process. Ever since, he's hated what he became. He tears up while saying this, and Anko comforts him, then hands him a ring that only causes him more pain. As the vamp teacher tries to let go, Anko forces him to hold it, insisting he die as a human, with no way to free himself. He burns to ashes when the sun comes up, leaving Yumori and his friends in utter shock. But Yumori snaps out of it and asks why she had to unalive the vamp teacher like that. Anko grabs him by the shirt, telling him the man was doomed to die already. She reminds him that he knows nothing about vampires and that she's not here to make his dream of becoming one come true. Before leaving, she drops her business card and tells all 3 students to contact her if they need to. After that, Yumori walks home, realizing he still has a lot to learn about vampires. At home, he lies in bed, thinking about what Anko said earlier, while Maharu sits in Anko's office, crashing out about what he's learned so far. On giving everything a second thought, Yumori decides that he'll meet Mizuna to get an explanation. That evening, when he shows up at Mizuna's place, she appears too thirsty and begs for a sip, casually insisting that she might lose it. On hearing this, Yumori stops her from feeding, because he recalls how the late vamp acted when he lost control. Mizuna quickly figures out that something happened. So after hearing everything about the late vamp, she says she's not like him. She assures him he has nothing to worry about and decides they go out for a stroll to calm things down. On the way, she mentions something about vampires dying if they spend about 10 years without feeding. She then asks about Anko, curious about who she is, and Yumori tells her she knows that he wants to become a vampire. Now, he's a bit worried about it because Anko knows how to unalive a vampire. Though Mizuna says it's impossible for a human to unalive a vampire, Yumori tells her he doesn't want her getting hurt because of him. He's still traumatized by what happened and admits that for the first time, he was scared of vampires. Still, he apologizes for preventing Mizuna from feeding on him and allows her to drink till she's full. Later, Maharu bids farewell to stepmommy, But since she's so blessed, Yamori can't help but stare at her milkers. He freaks out when he gets caught, and Maharu ends up teaching him how to look without getting caught. Midway through their conversation, Maharu asks Yamori why he wants to become a vampire, because even as a human, he's free to do whatever he wants. He reminds Yamori that Akira would have died at the hands of a vampire and feels that it's not right for him to desire becoming one. Currently, he likes that they've reconnected as friends and started having fun, but he circles back to his initial question, asking why he wants to become a vampire. All of a sudden, Yamori's head goes blank when he tries to answer because, in terms of attaining freedom, he's gotten it already. Thinking about it fries all his remaining brain cells, and he ends up in a loop with no way out. So Maharu lets him off the leash and says he doesn't have to answer immediately. Later, when Yamori hugs Nazuna the moment he arrives at her place, she can tell that something is up. To calm things down, they agree to a change of scenery, so they end up in Yamori's house. Here, Nazuna searches everywhere for spicy magazines, but since she doesn't find any, she checks around for tissue or hand lotion. Mid-search, she asks Yamori if he's thinking twice about becoming a vampire, and he tells her that being one comes with its problems. He says he's cool with it as long as she's around, but deep down, he's worried that his friends might get hurt. On hearing this, Nazuna's mood shifts, but she asks him why he likes being out at night. When Yamori says it's because of the freedom, Nazuna reminds him that his time at night is now his new normal and nothing stays fresh forever, because very soon, it might get boring again. She even admits from her perspective that being a vampire is boring and apologizes for not telling him. To her, living for decades is a drag, but at least she's grateful that she's grown good at playing video games. After that, she opts to go home, but Yamori stops her because he hasn't turned the lights off yet. Consequently, they both end up on his bed, but as Yamori expects to get a kiss, she only teases him and fades into the night. The following day, Yamori finally reaches out to Anko, who calls him out for not hitting on her properly. Yamori brushes it off as he's not interested in giving her 8 inches yet. Instead, he asks how much she knows about him. Shocked, Anko goes into details about his life, revealing his interest in big milkers as well as a few questionable extras. Flustered, he begs her to stop, and Anko brushes it off like she was just guessing. Next, Yamori asks why she's so against vampires, and she explains that they can't coexist with humans. She calls them monsters and tells Yamori about how he might never become one because he's incapable of falling in love. She begins acting weird as she tells him that he might die because he knows too much about vampires, but questions why Nazuna got him involved when she knew the consequences. The fact that she knows Nazuna's name shocks Yamori, but the possibility of him winding up dead with her shocks him the most. As he freaks out, Anko forces him to choose between living as a human or dying as a vampire at her hand. Curious, Yamori asks if she really knows how to unalive vampires, and she says yes, but she refuses to tell how it's done. However, Yamori refuses to flip because he believes that not all vampires are bad. So Anko ends up calling the cops to report a strange kid hanging out at night, and he's forced to run away so he doesn't lose his night freedom. Soon, the cops show up, and he's forced to hide at a park, where Hatsuka finds him. At Nazuna's apartment, she gets bored with playing video games because of everything going on with Yamori, so she quits and decides to visit the other vampires. In the meantime, Yamori joins Hatsuka at her place, and he's shocked to find 2 chicks and a guy drooling over her. Apparently, they're in love with her and would do anything she asks, so she tells them to get out because she's having a guest. Later, while Hatsuka is taking a shower, Yamori struggles to process what happened earlier, and he quickly realizes that the people he saw might be in line to get turned. Deep down, he wonders what's up with Hatsuka because she seems different from the other vampires he's met, but he snaps out of his thoughts once he sees Hatsuka without clothes in the shower. On seeing that she's flatter than a board, Yamori realizes that she's a guy, and it shocks him to his bones when Hatsuka confirms this. Yamori struggles to process that Hatsuka is a guy, but Hatsuka thinks that Nazuna would have told him already. Yamori says Nazuna doesn't tell him much, and Hatsuka confirms that she's used to dodging difficult conversations, but wonders if she's having a fight with Yamori. Meanwhile, Nazuna meets the other vampires and reveals that Yamori might not become a vampire. She apologizes for breaching their deal, but begs that they leave him alone, even if he remains human. Nico flares up after hearing this and punches her drinking table to bits. Pissed that Nazuna would show up and start making absurd demands, she threatens to unalive Nazuna on the spot, but the chicks tell her to go for it if she can. Rather than give in to the urge to fight, Nico reminds her that unaliving themselves isn't allowed in their species, so the best solution is to make sure Yamori winds up dead. However, Nazuna claps back, threatening to break the rules and unalive her if Yamori dies. And this forces Nico to ask what makes Yamori different from other humans. At the same time, Hatsuka becomes shocked after Yamori tells him that he's having second thoughts about becoming a vampire, but calms down after Yamori tells him that Anko unalived one of their kind. Truth is, he doesn't know that much about their species and how it would be possible for them to be exterminated, so Hatsuka tells Yamori that Nazuna isn't hiding anything from him. He then recalls Nazuna commenting on how sweet Yamori tastes, so Hatsuka decides to have a bite and see for himself. However, Yamori declines because he doesn't swing that way and proceeds to ask why he dresses up like a girl. Hatsuka says it's because he's cute and it makes it easier since he attracts both genders. Soon, Hatsuka receives a notification that Nazuna is having a fight with Miko, and he fears that something might go wrong. Yamori gets the full gist when he hears the info, because his life is at risk and Nazuna is only trying to protect him. On seeing the way things might play out, Hatsuka decides that he'll be the one to turn Yamori. When Yamori asks why, Hatsuka tells him that he might not fall for Nazuna because she isn't romantic enough, and he feels that with him, it will work because they're both guys.
You are gay.
Though Yamori begins to see a possibility of falling for him, he declines because he likes Nazuna, and when Hatsuka asks if it's because of gender, Yamori tells him that he'd still pick Nazuna if he was a girl. As for what happens to him next, he feels confident that he'll live another day since Hatsuka isn't out to unalive him. So he runs off to find Nazuna. However, on reaching Nico, he finds that he's already too late since Nazuna has left the place. What disturbs him most is Nico saying Nazuna won't be able to have a normal conversation for a while. She says Nazuna made a deal to guarantee his safety, and that's when Yamori snaps and asks what she did to her. But since Nico refuses to say anything, he dashes out to find Nazuna himself. On the way, he's forced to hide and be cautious since the cops are patrolling the city, but even then, two officers find him. Without thinking twice, he jumps off a bridge and runs away, searching for his favorite vampire. Meanwhile, Nazuna walks by herself, wondering if Yamori is pissed at her. She feels bad about lying to him this whole time because the truth is, she doesn't know how to enjoy the night. But as she tries to get beer from a vending machine, Yamori shows up from nowhere and teases her just like the first time they met. Shocked, Nazuna questions what he's doing there, and he tells her he was searching around the whole city for her. He becomes relieved when he sees that she's okay, but notices Nazuna's dismissive mood and decides to apologize for everything. He opens up about enjoying all the time he spent with her at night, emphasizing that he's never bored with her. On the other hand, Nazuna reveals the truth to him about how she's been acting cool to enjoy the night, though she thinks back and realizes that she had fun with him. She then tries to warn him about the deal she made with Nico, but finds herself kissing Yamori after he promises to fall in love with her. Deep down, she wants to become the kind of vampire he can fall in love with, and after the kiss, she says they should work it out. That's it for this video. If you enjoyed it, subscribe to the channel, make sure to stay focused, keep your zippers locked, and all hand lotions away. Give me 10k likes and I'll post unplotted. And also if you're into anime recaps like this, check out the next video, you might just goon to it.